Hello? 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 Okay. If you can hear me, can you say something? Okay, good evening. Oh, can you hear me? Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. Oh, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you say something so that I will know that you can hear me? Hello? Let me send the link of this thing so that you join. See whether you can hear me. Or these students are not making it. Let me send it to you. Hello? Okay. Hello? Okay. We are starting now. Good evening, everyone. Okay. Like I said earlier, today's lecture is going to be on vitamin B12 metabolism and folate metabolism. And we are still going to talk about megaloblastic anemia today. Vitamin B12, like we all know, is part of the B complex vitamins that we know about. But the appropriate name for vitamin B12 is cobalamin. That is the appropriate name for vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 or cobalamin is the largest of the B complex vitamins, and it has molecular weight of over 1,000. It has a generic name for this particular group of compound. We call them corinoids. And it consists of corine ring made up of 4 pyrocorine ring. At the center of it, you have what we call cobalt atom. We know cobalt. Cobalt is the major trace metal in the human physiology. Cobalt is a major trace metal in human physiology. I need to know whether you are all hearing me. Can you? Good evening. Okay, are you all hearing me? Okay, so we'll continue. Okay, thank you. So we'll continue. Okay. Vitamin B12, like I said earlier, is water soluble, and it is also heat stable. It is red in color. It is red in color. And like I said earlier, it contains cobalt atom at the center of the chlorine ring. At the center of the chlorine ring contains cobalt atom. So the weight of cobalt atom is about 4.35%. 4.35%. Now, there are this vitamin B12. I told you earlier that you can also call it cobalamin. They're actually the same thing. The correct name is actually cobalamin. Okay? So it has different forms. So we have different forms of cobalamin, like about 4 different forms of cobalamin. We have what we call cyanocobalamin. We have another one we call hydroxycobalamin. We have methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. I said we have 4 types of cobalamin: cyanocobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, methylcobalamin, and adenosylcobalamin. Now, out of these 4 forms of cobalamin that I just mentioned, we have 2 forms as supplements. The one you have as supplements, some of us must have taken vitamin B12 supplement, in the hospital or even at home. Your mama will say, lift your tongue, they will put it under your tongue and it will diffuse. Okay? So the form you have as supplement, you can say cyanocobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. It can occur as supplement as cyanocobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. But you have the forms that cobalamin, the form that can be used to, cobalamin can only be used in the body in 2 forms. Cobalamin can only be used when we eat food that contains vitamin B12. It can only be used in our body in 2 forms. And those forms are what we call 5-adenosylcobalamin and methylcobalamin. So you see, vitamin B12 exists in 4 forms. Like I said earlier, cyanocobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, methylcobalamin, and adenosylcobalamin. But out of these forms of vitamin B12, we have 2 forms that we can see in our supplements, the vitamin B12 supplements that we take. And also, those 2 forms we can see as supplements are the cyanocobalamin and hydroxycobalamin. And then we have other 2 forms that you can utilize vitamin B12 in our body. So vitamin B12 that we eat as food can only function in our body in only these 2 forms. And we have the 2 forms are the methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. So B12 can only function in our body either as methylcobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. Where do we get this vitamin B12 in nature? Where do we get them? You see, human beings cannot synthesize vitamin B12. We are handling vitamin B12 metabolism. If you are just joining us now, the topic that we are handling is vitamin B12 metabolism. Vitamin B12 metabolism. That is the topic that we are teaching now. Okay? And I said this vitamin B12, you can also call it cobalamin. Another name for vitamin B12 is cobalamin. So, and we are saying that this vitamin B12, where can we get it in nature? Where can we get it in nature? And I said that human beings cannot synthesize vitamin B12. We cannot produce vitamin B12. Okay? Vitamin B12 is actually synthesized in microorganisms. They are synthesized in microorganisms, okay, and enters the human food chain through incorporation, into our food, meat, food from animal origin. We have these microorganisms, that line the guts of these lower animals. The gastrointestinal fermentation that will take place in this microorganism, in these animals, support the synthesis of this vitamin B12 in microorganisms that line their guts, okay? And subsequently, when the microorganism synthesizes the vitamin B12 within them, subsequently the vitamin is absorbed and incorporated into the animal tissue. So by the time that we humans eat this animal tissue or products from these animals, we can get vitamin B12 from them. So in nature, where do we humans get vitamin B12? We get vitamin B12 from meat. When we eat meat, we get vitamin B12 from milk, fish, butter, or egg. That is food of animal products, food from animals. Meat, milk, fish, butter, egg. That is where we get vitamin B12 from. Now, when we eat this vitamin B12, what happens? When we eat this vitamin B12, what happens? Please, if you have any question, feel free to put it on the listen. I will quickly answer you. Thank you. If you have any question, just put it up. I will quickly answer. Okay? We are now discussing absorption of vitamin B12. We are discussing absorption of vitamin B12. What happens when we eat food with vitamin B12? Remember we said that vitamin B12, we can only get it from food from animal origin. When we eat meat, when we eat fish, when we eat milk, when we eat egg, things from animal origin, that's where we get vitamin B12 from. We humans, we cannot synthesize it. It's only microorganisms that synthesize it. And as these microorganisms that line the gut of lower animals, by the time that we eat the meat from these lower animals, the tissue, because B12 has kind of been synthesized in microorganisms, has escaped and been absorbed by the tissue of the lower animals. By the time we eat the meat, we get our own vitamin B12 from there. So what happens when we eat this vitamin B12 as incorporated inside meat products? When we humans eat animal food, this vitamin B12 is protein bound. It's protein bound in our mouth as we are chewing the meat. As we are chewing the meat or eating the product that has vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is always protein bound. And when we swallow the meat, it gets inside the stomach. And you know that in the stomach is very acidic. The 4 forms of vitamin B12, let me repeat it again. Somebody said she did not get the 4 forms of vitamin B12. The 4 forms of vitamin B12 are, we have cyanocobalamin, we have methylcobalamin, we have hydroxycobalamin, and we have adenosylcobalamin. We have adenosylcobalamin. Now, somebody says, where can vitamin B12 be synthesized? I said microorganisms. Microorganisms that line the gut of lower animals like your cow, your goats, okay? They're the one that synthesize this vitamin B12. And subsequently, this vitamin B12 is absorbed and incorporated into the tissue of these animals. So I found out that by the time we eat the tissue of these animals, that is where we get our own vitamin B12. That is where we get our own vitamin B12. So the only source of vitamin B12 can only be found from animal origin. You cannot get it from fruits, you cannot get it from vegetables, you cannot get it from grains or cereals. You can only get it from food of animal origin, like meat, milk, fish, butter, egg. Okay? Now I say when we eat this vitamin B12, what happens? How is it absorbed? Okay? We can absorb, it can be the absorption of the digestion and metabolism. How is it absorbed? Okay, I said when we chew meat, the meat that contains the B12, in our mouth, the B12 is bound to protein. And normally when we eat meat, when we eat food, when we chew it in our mouth, the next thing we swallow it. It passes through the esophagus and enters into the stomach. Okay? And we all know that the stomach is very, very acidic. Stomach is very, very acidic. It contains hydrochloric acid. Okay? It contains hydrochloric acid. So when the vitamin B12 complex reaches the stomach, the vitamin B12 is released from the protein that is bound to by the action of the high concentration of the hydrochloric acid present in the stomach. Okay? It is released from the protein it is bound to by the action of the high concentration of the hydrochloric acid present in the stomach. And then what happens? When the hydrochloric acid present in the stomach acts on the protein-bound B12, it makes it free. But if it makes it free, remember that the stomach is very, very acidic. The stomach is very, very acidic. So the free B12 will be easily denatured if it is not protected. The B12 can easily be denatured by the acidic nature of the stomach if it is not denatured. So what happens? The stomach also produces a protein called R binder. This protein can be produced by the stomach or the salivary gland. These two proteins can be produced by the stomach or the salivary gland. Okay? So the protein is called R binder. So when the hydrochloric acid in the stomach releases this vitamin B12 from the protein, what happens? It quickly binds to this R binder. It is this R binder that will carry it out of the stomach to the small intestine. Okay? Let me repeat again. Somebody is still asking me 4 forms of vitamin B12. The 4 forms of vitamin B12 I mentioned earlier, I said methylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, adenosylcobalamin, and cyanocobalamin. Those are the 4 forms. So, Neji, Nneka, have you gotten it now? Okay? The 4 forms are methylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, cyanocobalamin, and adenosylcobalamin. And I said in supplements you have it as cyanocobalamin and hydroxycobalamin. Why in our body it can only function in 2 forms. Adenosylcobalamin and methylcobalamin. Okay? Remember, we are discussing absorption. We are discussing absorption now, and I said by the time you eat your food, vitamin B12, and you chew the meat. Remember, vitamin B12 is gotten from products, okay? So by the time you eat your meat, the vitamin B12, you chew the meat, you swallow it inside their stomach. the hydrochloric acid that is present in the stomach will act on the meat, and it will release vitamin B12 free from the protein that is bound to. Remember that the stomach is naturally very acidic in nature. So if you leave the vitamin B12 unprotected, the acidic nature in the stomach will do what? Will denature it. It will denature it. So what happens is that when it is released, it quickly binds to another protein called R binder. It quickly binds to another protein called what? R binder. This R binder is produced by the stomach and the salivary gland. The R binder is produced by the stomach and the salivary gland. Another name for R binder is haptocorins. Another name for R binder is what? Another name for the R binder is haptocorins. This R binder, the work is to carry this vitamin B12 and take it to the small intestine. You carry the vitamin B12 from the stomach and transport it to the small intestine. Now, when they get to the small intestine, what happens in the small intestine? Remember, the small intestine is alkaline in nature. The small intestine is alkaline in nature. So when they get to the small intestine, there is another protein called intrinsic factor. This protein is produced by the parietal cells of the stomach. The protein is produced by the parietal cells of the stomach. So what happens? When this protein is produced, it moves to small intestine. By the time R binder brings vitamin B12 to the small intestine, what happens? The alkaline nature of the small intestine does not favor the bonding between R binder and B12. So the B12 will dissociate from the R binder and joins to intrinsic factor. So the intrinsic factor is what carries the B12 straight on to the part of the small intestine called the ileum. So at the ileum, we have the cells on the walls of the ileum that enables the absorption of vitamin B12 from the small intestine. So in a nutshell, I can say that vitamin B12 is absorbed in the ileum part of the small intestine. The vitamin B12 is absorbed in the ileum part of the small intestine. So when vitamin B12, so remember that what enables the absorption of vitamin B12 is what? A protein called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor. The intrinsic factor carries the vitamin B12 from the small intestine at the duodenal part of the small intestine towards the ileum part, where it is what? It is absorbed. Where it is absorbed. Remember that this intrinsic factor is produced by the parietal cells of the stomach. The intrinsic factor is produced by the parietal cells of the stomach. And again, when the cells lining the ileum contain receptors that help in, absorption of cobalamin intrinsic factor complex. Now, the mucosal wall of the mucosal wall, that's the walls of the small intestine, that's the ileum part. When it takes up the B12 intrinsic factor complex, the vitamin B12 is released from its complex, and from there it reaches the portal circulation. From there it reaches the portal circulation. Now, inside the circulation, when it is absorbed, remember it is absorbed in the ileum, And what helps in this absorption is what? A protein called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor. And then when it is absorbed and it enters the circulation, it is transported in combination with a protein called transcobalamin 2. Vitamin B12 is transported in the circulation by a protein called transcobalamin 2. So the vitamin B12 is then presented to cells where it is taken up by the cells through the receptor mediated, the process called endocytosis. A process called endocytosis. Now, in addition to the intrinsic factor mechanism of absorption of B12, a small percentage of B12 can also be absorbed through diffusion mechanism. A small percentage of B12 can also be absorbed through diffusion mechanism. Okay? About 1 to 3% can be absorbed through passive diffusion. About 1 to 3% can be absorbed through passive diffusion. So, where is vitamin B12 stored? When they are not being utilized in the body, where are they stored? Vitamin B12, we are discussing vitamin B12 metabolism. We are discussing vitamin B12 metabolism. Okay? So by the time they are absorbed and when they are not utilized, where are they stored? Vitamin B12 is stored in the liver, and it can also be, to some extent, stored in the leukocyte and gastric mucosa, but it is predominantly stored in the liver and in a complex of a protein called transcobalamin 3. Remember, a protein called transcobalamin 2 helps to transport it in the circulation. Wilfred Rita, I don't know whether you heard me now. Transcobalamin 2 is the protein that transports vitamin B12 in the circulation. Okay? While transcobalamin 3 is the protein that vitamin B12 is stored with in the liver. It's stored as transcobalamin 3 in the liver, while transcobalamin 2 is what helps in what? Circulating it, carrying it through the circulation. Okay? Somebody said I should recap. Okay, so let me recap quickly what I just absorption. Somebody said I should recap. Neck, he said I'm too fast. Okay, let me go a little bit slower this time around. Let me just recap what we just said. I just said earlier. I said that vitamin B12 is one of the complex, B-complex vitamins that we have. And we said the molecular weight is what? 1,000. I said it is heat stable, it's water soluble, it is red in color. It contains cobalt atom at the center. And I said it is about 4.35% cobalt atom. Okay? And I said we have different forms of this vitamin B12. We have it as cyanocobalamin. Remember I said another name of vitamin B12 is cobalamin. Okay? I hope nobody is confused about that because I'll be using the two terms interchangeably. Another name for vitamin B12 is what? Cobalamin. Okay? So I said you have 4 forms of cobalamin. That is 4 forms of vitamin B12. I said number 1, cyanocobalamin. Number 2, hydroxycobalamin. Number 3, adenosylcobalamin. And number 4, methylcobalamin. And I said in supplements, we have it in supplements as cyanocobalamin and hydroxycobalamin. But inside our body, when we eat food that contains this vitamin B12, inside our body, vitamin B12 can only function in two parts, in two forms. And the form that vitamin B12 can function as are adenosylcobalamin and methylcobalamin. Okay? And I said you can only get vitamin B12 from food from animal origin. We humans, we cannot synthesize vitamin B12. I said, you see, the lower animals, how do they, since we humans cannot synthesize it, the lower animal, can they also synthesize? I said, no, they can't, but they have some microorganisms that line their gut that can synthesize this vitamin B12. When they synthesize it inside their gut, this vitamin B12 are absorbed by the tissue of these animals. By the time we humans eat this tissue, we get vitamin B12 from it. Okay? By the time we humans eat the tissue, we get vitamin B12 from it. Okay? So, when we eat this meat that contains vitamin B12, I said in the mouth, the vitamin B12 is bound, you know, as we chew. It is bound to protein, and at times, vitamin B12 can be absorbed from under the tongue. Under the tongue, can be absorbed from under the tongue. But when we swallow the meat enters the stomach. The meat enters the stomach, and you know, the stomach, when it enters this, when we eat food and it enters the stomach, we all know that the stomach is very, very acidic. It contains concentrated hydrochloric acid. So this concentrated hydrochloric acid, when it acts on the food that we've eaten, it will release vitamin B12. And if you don't act fast, it will denature vitamin B12. Where's the Lawrence? I can see you say she's smiling, okay? I just hope you're understanding what I'm saying. The most important thing that you understand what I'm saying. Okay? Chiamaka Emmanuel, well done. Okay. So I'm saying here that by the time we eat food and it enters the stomach, okay, the stomach is naturally acidic. It acts and releases vitamin B12, but if we leave the vitamin B12 like that, it will do what? It will denature because of the high concentration of acid in the stomach. So this vitamin B12 will quickly bind to a protein called R binder. This protein called R binder is also produced by the stomach, or it can also be produced by the salivary gland. So it is this R binder that will protect it in the stomach from the acidic nature of the stomach and carry it to the small intestine. By the time they get to the small intestine is alkaline in nature. Small intestine is not acidic. It is alkaline in nature. So it does not favor R binder. So what happens? There is another protein that is produced by the stomach. This time around, the parietal cells of the stomach. Remember that the parietal cells of the stomach is the cell that produces the hydrochloric acid. So in addition to producing hydrochloric acid, they also produce what? A protein called intrinsic factor. It is this intrinsic factor that will go to small intestine, collect this B12 from R binder, and carry it to this part of small intestine called ileum. And that is where B12 is absorbed. When it is absorbed at that part of the small intestine called ileum, it now attaches itself to a protein called transcobalamin 2. This protein called transcobalamin 2 is what carries it through the circulation to the cells where it is utilized. When it is not utilized, it is then stored in the liver as transcobalamin 3. It is stored in the liver as transcobalamin 3. Okay? So that is about the absorption of vitamin B12. Now let us look at the biochemical function of vitamin B12. Like I told you earlier, I said that vitamin B12 can only function, in two forms as methylcobalamin in our body, can only be utilized in our body in two forms. And these forms are methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. So, what are the biochemical functions of vitamin B12? They are only two. You see, when I ask people what are the functions of vitamin B12, you can give me some things like it helps in production of red blood cells, it helps in production of is it a DNA and all that, you know. You can say that, but I really want you to tell me exactly what the function is. Now, there are two reactions, two metabolic reactions that vitamin B12 is actually involved in our body. Vitamin B12 is involved in only two metabolic reactions in our body. And this metabolic reaction is number one, conversion of homocysteine to methionine. Conversion of homocysteine to methionine. Vitamin B12 is involved in the conversion of homocysteine to methionine. The second one is, the second reaction that is involved in is what? Isomerization of methyl coenzyme A. Isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl CoA. So when you are asked what are the two main biochemical functions of vitamin B12 in our body, Akana asked me a question. Says, "Ma, please, what happens if vitamin B12 undergoes denaturation in the stomach?" If vitamin B12 undergoes denaturation in the stomach, that means it cannot be utilized. It becomes useless to the person. So you can just pass it out through physics, and it goes because it cannot be absorbed as vitamin B12 again. Okay? Now we are discussing biochemical function. Biochemical function of vitamin B12. Yes, somebody, okay. Chiamaka Emmanuel says I should recap functions of vitamin B12. Yes, we are still on it. So listen to me, Chiamaka. Okay, Chimampa, sorry about that. Chimampa Emmanuel. Okay. I said there are two main biochemical functions that vitamin B12 is involving in our body. Number one function is conversion of homocysteine to methionine. Conversion of homocysteine to methionine. Okay? In the conversion of homocysteine to methionine, vitamin B12 is actually used. Vitamin B12 serves as a coenzyme in this conversion, and it is utilized in form of methylcobalamin in this reaction. It is utilized in form of what? Methylcobalamin in this reaction. So the first reaction I mentioned as remember I said there are two reactions. So I said the first reaction is conversion of homocysteine to methionine. Conversion of homocysteine to methionine. And in this conversion, vitamin B12 is utilized as a coenzyme in form of methylcobalamin. The second one is number two reaction that vitamin B12 is involving is the second one, number two, is isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl CoA. Isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl CoA. Now, in this particular reaction, vitamin B12 is utilized as a coenzyme in form of adenosylcobalamin. In form of what? Adenosylcobalamin. So, Two reactions that vitamin B12 is involved in: conversion of homocysteine to methionine, and vitamin B12 is utilized in form of methylcobalamin, isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl-CoA, and vitamin B12 is utilized in form of what? Adenosylcobalamin. Now, what is the significance of the first reaction? What is the significance of the first reaction? That is conversion of homocysteine to methionine. You see, in this particular reaction, this is the reaction that actually combines vitamin B12 and folate together. In this reaction, conversion of homocysteine to methionine, vitamin B12 serves as a coenzyme in form of methylcobalamin, and also in this particular reaction, active form of folate is generated. The active form of folate, what we call tetrahydrofolate, is generated. Folate is folic acid. Okay? So what it means is that without vitamin B12 in the body, your body cannot utilize folic acid. So because vitamin B12 is needed in order to generate the active form of folic acid. So you see why in the hospital, whenever you are giving folic acid, they quickly also add vitamin B12. And most times, vitamin B12 and folate, we always say deficiency of vitamin B12 and folate causes a form of anemia called megaloblastic anemia. It is because they are linked together. Together. Goodness, Chidimma, you just joined us. We are discussing vitamin B12 metabolism, and we've said a lot of things, and we are just treating the function. Okay? So, what is the significance of that reaction? The first reaction, that is conversion of homocysteine to methionine. I said the importance of this reaction is that one of the most important things is that the active form of folate is generated by this reaction. The active form of folate is generated by this reaction. And again, folate is very, very important. So you find out that when you don't have vitamin B12 in your body, you cannot utilize folate. You cannot utilize folic acid. That means even when you take folic acid as supplement or you eat it in the food, you have accumulation of folic acid because you don't have vitamin B12 to generate the active form of folic acid. And that phenomenon, that condition is what we call, in medical terms, we call it methylfolate trap. Methylfolate trap. A situation where an individual is lacking vitamin B12, but the person has folate. But the person cannot utilize folate because he doesn't have vitamin B12 to generate active form of folate. We have what we call, then we have accumulation of folate, and we call it methylfolate trap. That is accumulation of folate because of lack of vitamin B12 to generate the active form of folate, which is tetrahydrofolate. Okay? Then we also have isomerization of, the second reaction is isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl coenzyme A. Here, vitamin B12 is utilized as adenosylcobalamin, as a coenzyme. You see, what happens here is that when vitamin B12 is not available, to do what? To act as a coenzyme in this conversion of methyl malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl-CoA, what happens is that you have accumulation of this methyl malonyl coenzyme A. You have this accumulation in the system. And when this thing accumulates in the system, it causes demyelination of nerve endings, the axons and the nerve endings. When it causes demyelination of axons and the nerve endings, what happens? It has this neurological symptom that is associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. That is what causes the neurological symptoms that is associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. Now, in the isomerization of methyl coenzyme A to succinyl CoA, there is an enzyme that is involved. Apart from vitamin B12 in form of adenosine cobalamin, we have methylmalonyl CoA mutase that is also involved in this reaction. Like I said earlier, if vitamin B12 is lacking, now methylmalonyl CoA, that is methylmalonyl coenzyme A, will accumulate in the body. And when it is accumulated, it is excreted, and the patient will excrete it in urine as methylmalonic acid. Okay? And accumulation of this methylmalonyl CoA causes demyelination of nerve. Demyelination of the nerve. That is, myelination of nerves is impaired in vitamin B12 deficiency due to accumulation of methylmalonyl CoA. And when this happens, what happens? The patient will have neurological disorder. And this is actually what happens when a patient lacks vitamin B12. And this is what brings about the neurological symptoms that is associated with what? B12 deficiency. Neji, you said, I don't understand the significance of the second reaction. I said the significance of second reaction is that methylmalonyl coenzyme A is converted to succinyl CoA. Do you understand? Now, number one significance is this. That compound called succinyl coenzyme A is one of the things that is needed to produce hemoglobin. So you know that red blood cell contains hemoglobin. And inside hemoglobin, you have what we call, inside the red blood cell, you have what we call hemoglobin. That hemoglobin is what carries oxygen. Okay? In the synthesis of hemoglobin, the very first step in the synthesis of hemoglobin is reaction of succinyl CoA plus glycine to form a compound called I said in the synthesis of hemoglobin, the first step is reaction between succinyl CoA and glycine, okay, to form a compound called diruvulonic acid. Now, if succinyl CoA is not there, the synthesis of hemoglobin will be affected, okay? If succinyl, okay, Precious, as they said, I'm too fast, okay? Let me come down a bit. Chimampa asked me a question. He said that he doesn't understand the significance of the second reaction. So I'm trying to explain to him the significance of the second reaction. Okay, listen. The second reaction is isomerization of methylmalonyl coenzyme A to what? Succinyl CoA, okay? And I said that in this reaction, vitamin B12 is utilized in form of what? Adenosine cobalamin. Chimampa, did you get that part I just mentioned now? That in this particular reaction, vitamin B12 is utilized as a form of coenzyme in form of adenosine cobalamin, okay? That is the reaction. Now, what is the significance? I'm trying to tell you one of the significance. Number one, is that when methyl-malonyl-CoA is converted to succinyl-CoA, a product called succinyl-CoA is produced. And I said that this succinyl-CoA, the succinyl-CoA is involved, is utilized in the production of what? Hemoglobin. That is the first significance. Do you understand? So if you say, if you say that vitamin B12 helps in the production of blood, do you understand, for example? This is one of the things, what it actually does. It helps in the producing succinyl-CoA. This succinyl-CoA is what is actually utilized in producing what? Hemoglobin. And you know that hemoglobin is actually what carries the oxygen. Okay? This is the first significance. Now, the second significance is this. If vitamin B12 is not there, if vitamin B12 is not there to convert methyl-malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl-CoA, what happens is that this methyl-malonyl CoA will accumulate in the body. Do you understand? When it accumulates in the body, the patient will not feel normal. The patient will excrete this methyl-malonyl CoA in the urine. The patient will pass it through the urine. That is number one. Number two, when it accumulates in the body, this methyl-malonyl CoA accumulates in the body because of lack of vitamin B12. What happens is that it affects the brain cells. It affects the brain cells. It affects the nerves, the nerve endings of the body. Everywhere you have nerves in the body, it causes demyelination. It causes, I keep saying I'm too fast. Okay, how do you want me to speak to reduce the... It causes demyelination of the nerve endings. Okay? When there is demyelination of nerve endings, okay, said I should recap the second significance. Okay. The second significance, I said number one significance is that it helps in the production of succinyl-CoA. This succinyl-CoA helps in production of what? Hemoglobin. Okay? Helps in the production of hemoglobin. So you understand that part. Okay? Now, the second one is that when vitamin B12 is not there, what does it do? You have accumulation of methyl-malonyl CoA. It will accumulate in the body. Okay? When it accumulates in the body, what happens? It affects the nerve endings, and it causes demyelination of the nerve endings. When there is demyelination of nerve endings, you have what we call the neurological symptoms that is associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. The neurological symptom that is associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. So I have said it, vitamin B12 is involved in just two reactions in the body. Number one, conversion of homocysteine to methionine. And in this reaction, vitamin B12 is utilized in form of methylcobalamin. The second one is isomerization of methyl-malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl-CoA. And in this particular reaction, vitamin B12 is utilized in form of what? Adenosylcobalamin. Okay? Those are the two reactions that vitamin B12 are involved in. So what are the daily requirements of vitamin B12? Adults need about 1 microgram per day, while pregnant women and lactating mothers and children need about 2 micrograms per day. What are the factors? What are the factors that can affect vitamin B12 absorption? factors that can affect vitamin B12 absorption include poor diet. You know, when you are not taking it in the diet, remember we said you can only get it from food from animal origin. Okay. The another one is people that are vegans, people that are vegetarians. People that are vegetarians do what? They eat food that is, they don't eat meat. Okay. I remember we said that you can only get vitamin B12 from the meat or food of animal origin alone. For requirement, we said adults need only 1 microgram per day. Adults, 1 microgram per day, while pregnant and lactating mothers and small children need 2 microgram per day. 2 microgram per day. And I said factors that can affect vitamin B12 absorption. I said poor diet, people that are vegetarians. Vegetarians are people that eat only vegetables. They don't eat meat. Okay. We also have lack of intrinsic factor. Lack of intrinsic factor. Remember that intrinsic factor is the protein that helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. So, if an individual lacks intrinsic factor, maybe it is congenital. Congenital means the person is born without intrinsic factor. Okay? Congenital means that the person is born without what? Intrinsic factor. Okay. So if an individual is born without intrinsic factor, the person won't be able to take in vitamin B12 from the diet. Okay. Now, anemia that exists as a result of lack of intrinsic factor. Maybe a patient was not born with the intrinsic factor, or maybe because of a surgery or something, it was tampered with. The anemia that can develop as a result of lack of intrinsic factor is what we call pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia. It is different from megaloblastic anemia. We are going to discuss megaloblastic anemia later. Pernicious anemia is different from megaloblastic anemia. Pernicious anemia occurs as a result of what? Simply lack of intrinsic factor. Not because the patient does not eat enough vitamin B12. It's simply as a result of the fact that the patient does not have intrinsic factor to aid the absorption of vitamin B12. Okay? So what we are discussing now is factors that can affect absorption. We say poor diet, people that are vegetarians, vegans, lack of intrinsic factor, any disease that can affect the ileum. Remember that B12 is absorbed at the ileum part of the small intestine. So any disease that can affect it can also cause what? Affect the absorption of the vitamin B12. Somebody said, can I elaborate on intrinsic factor? We talked about it before. We said intrinsic factor is produced by the parietal cells of the stomach, and it is what helps in absorption of vitamin B12 at the ileum part of the small intestine. So lack of intrinsic factor alone can affect absorption of vitamin B12. And the situation where an individual is born without intrinsic factor, a form of anemia that it can cause is what? Pernicious anemia. And I said that it is different from megaloblastic anemia that we are going to discuss later. Okay. Thank you, Precious Owazie. Thank you for explaining it out for her. Okay. So we have causes of deficiency. Deficiency can be as a result of inadequate intake, seen in pure vegetarians, impaired absorption, okay, as I explained earlier, if the patient is not having B12. And I said also that B12, what I want to mention now is that B12 helps, there is this link between B12 and cyanide poisoning. There is this B12, that this link between vitamin B12 and cyanide poisoning. You see, vitamin B12 has the largest and most complex chemical structure of all the vitamins. You see, and on the same note, vitamin B12 is the only vitamin that contains a metal, which is cobalt ion, okay? And how does it work? How does it help in the treatment of cyanide toxicity? How does vitamin B12 help, or the presence of cobalt atom help in the treatment of cyanide toxicity? Okay? As I said here, that hydroxycobalamin, when there is cyanide toxicity and the vitamin B12 is given to the patient, the hydroxycobalamin combines with cyanide to form cyanocobalamin, and this can be removed through the kidney, and the patient gets himself. So vitamin B12 can be used in treatment of what? Cyanide poisoning. Okay? Okay, somebody, Akana, thank you for that question. It says, can intrinsic factor be substituted with something else for someone who was born without it? No, no. It's just like people that have juvenile diabetes, or people that have juvenile diabetes. Those people can only take insulin. They are dependent on insulin. Okay. People that have juvenile diabetes, what happens to them? They don't, that is not the secondary diabetes, okay? Type 1 diabetes, people that have type 1 diabetes, what happens that they are dependent on insulin. These people cannot produce insulin on their own. So what happens? They are given insulin. For every day, they take in insulin. Some of them take it 2 times a day. Some take it once. Okay? It's the same thing with a patient who does not have intrinsic factor. What happens is that patient should be given, synthetically produced intrinsic factor, just like you give people that cannot produce insulin. I don't know whether you understand my explanation. For someone who can produce intrinsic factor, that means it can be given to the person artificially. The person should be given to the person. The synthetic produced intrinsic factor should be given to the person, just like we give insulin to insulin-dependent diabetes patient. Okay? I don't know whether there is any other question. Let's quickly go over folate metabolism. Let's quickly go over folate metabolism. Folate metabolism, like we are discussed with vitamin B12, folate consists of a large number of compounds derived from the parent compound called pteroglutamic acid. The commercially one, you see folate in our food as pteroglutamates, but the one that is we take as supplement is the one that we call the folic acid. Acid. Now, folates are natural occurring form of vitamins that are found in the food, while folic acid is the synthetically produced one and used in the fortified food and supplements. Folic acid in itself is not biologically active, but the biological active of folic acid is what we call tetrahydrofolate. The biological active form of folic acid is what we call tetrahydrofolate. The word Okay. He said folate. Somebody is asking me a question. Okay, I said teraglutamate. Teraglutamate. Okay. Okay. Teraglutamate. The teraglutamate starts with P. Pteroy, then glutamate. The P is silent. Teraglutamate. Okay. Steroglutamic acid. Okay. Now I said the word folic acid is derived from Latin word called folium. This Latin word actually means vegetables, leafy vegetable, which means folic acid can be gotten from what? Leafy vegetables. Like example, spinach. Folic acid can be gotten from spinach. And folic acid, the problem with folic acid is that it's very heat sensitive. It's heat sensitive. So when we cook our vegetables and overcook it, we lose them. Okay? Now, folic acid consists of three main components. Folic acid consists of three main components. Folic acid consists of Chisom Victory. What was your question that I have not answered? If you are talking about materials, there are two things. It's either you get the materials we are talking, or later you can go over the uploaded lecture video and then make notes for yourself. You can even get the PDF from there. If you can screenshot it and get the PDF. You can do that. Okay? I must not screenshot it for you now and send to you. You can do that on yourself. Open the uploaded video lecture on vitamin B12 metabolism, screenshot it, and then save it in your system. You can always read them over and over again. Okay? I said, okay, Chimamba Emmanuel, you asked me again, folic acid is gotten, I said it's from leafy vegetable, like spinach. Spinach is from vegetables. You have it a lot in leafy vegetables, like spinach. Okay? Folate is the one we see in our food. Folate is the one we see in our food. Folic acid. Christabel. Folate is the one we see in our food. Folic acid is the one we take as supplements. Folic acid is the one we take as supplements, the one that they normally use to fortify our food. Okay? Folic acid is the one we take as supplements. Folate is the one we see in our food. Okay? So what I'm saying right now is that folic acid mainly consists of three main components. Number one component is what we call pteridine ring. Pteridine ring, the spelling of pteridine starts with P. Pteridine. Pteridine ring. Number one contains pteridine ring. Number two, it contains p-amino benzoic acid. It contains p-amino benzoic acid. Number three, it contains glutamic acid residue. Number three, it contains glutamic acid residue. Therefore, you can call another name for folic acid, you can say it is glutamic acid. You can say it is what? Glutamic acid. Okay, Chisom Victory said, I asked about those neurological symptoms associated with B12 deficiency. Okay. I don't want to go back to vitamin B12 deficiency again. Otherwise, we will not move forward. But I told you that when we don't take vitamin B12, what happens? The methyl malonyl enzyme A accumulates and it causes demyelination of nerve endings. And demyelination of nerve endings causes neurological symptoms. Shaking of hands is neurological symptoms. You see somebody, the hand will just be shaking uncontrollable. It's neurological symptoms. Do you understand? There are different ways it can manifest in individual. It can even manifest with memory loss. The person will just discover he doesn't remember things. Do you understand? So let's move on with the folate that we are discussing now. I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question, okay? Onwe Fabulous, he said, what do you say that is the biological active form of folic acid? Okay, the biological active form of folic acid is called tetrahydrofolate. Tetrahydrofolate, okay? And Winifred said, folate is called folic acid when taken in supplements and food. Thank you very much. You just said what I said in another form, okay? The type of folate that you take as supplement is called what? Folic acid. The one that you take in your food is what we call folate, okay? Okay. So, please, the third component, okay. See, we say is the active form of folic acid tetrahydro, tetra, H-I-D-R-O, then folate. Chimamba, have you gotten it? Not hydric, hydro. Have you gotten it now? Tetrahydrofolate, okay? Not hydric, okay. So let's go over the components. The folic acid mainly consists of 3 components. And I said, number 1, precious. Listen now, so let's go over it again. Pteridine ring, that is number 1. And I said that pteridine ring is spelled as P-T-E-R-I-D-I-N-E. Pteridine ring. And then the second one is called P-aminobenzoic acid. P-aminobenzoic acid. And the third one is what? Glutamic acid residue. And then because of that, you can say that another name for folic acid is what? Pteroglutamic acid. Pteroglutamic acid. And I have said it before that the active form of folic acid, the active form of folate is what? Tetrahydrofolate. Tetrahydrofolate. Now, when we take folic acid as supplements, when we take another name for folic acid is pteroglutamic acid, P-T-R-O-Y-L. That is then glutamic, G-L-U-T-A-M-I-C, glutamic, then acid, okay? Pteroglutamic acid, that is another name for folic acid. Chimamba, do you get it now? Okay. Pteroglutamic acid, that's another name, okay? Maybe the next time we have this class, we'll upload our slide so that you won't ask many questions. It starts with PT. PT, yes. Nenka, P-T-E-R-O-Y-L. Okay, PT. So you have to add P at the beginning, and then T-E-R-O, then Y-L, then glutamic acid. Okay, okay. Please just put it up at there. Chibamba, can you write it out for them to see? Write the correct spelling, pteroglutamic acid. Neji tried, but I still am taking the spelling. Okay. The active form, like I said earlier, is tetrahydrofolate. Tetrahydrofolate, okay? Now, when we take supplement, okay, when we take supplements, that is folic acid. This folic acid is converted to active form of folate. Yes, that is the correct spelling. Thank you very much, Temple. Temple Crown, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Heaven. Thank you. That is the correct spelling. Thank you. Glutamic acid. That is another name for glutamic acid. Thank you very much. That is the correct spelling. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. No, Chimamba, yes. Temple, there is L. You remove the L after E. Please look at what is Chimamba. That is the correct one. Glutamic acid. Okay. So I'm saying that when you take folic acid, the folic acid is converted to the active form. The folic acid is converted to the active form of folate by an enzyme called dihydrofolate reductase. Dihydrofolate reductase. The folic acid that you take as supplement is converted to the active form of folate by an enzyme called what? Dihydrofolate reductase. Dihydrofolate reductase. Do you get that one? Yes, the active form is also known as biological form. Yeah? The active form is also known as the biological form. And that is tetrahydrofolate. And I said that when we take folic acid, the folic acid is converted to its active form by an enzyme called dihydrofolate reductase. Dihydrofolate reductase. That is the enzyme that converts folic acid to what? Active form of what? Folate. Dihydrofolate reductase. Okay. Now let's look at absorption of the folate in our food. Yes. Thank you very much. Dihydro. That should be R before O. Dihydro. That should be RO. That is DIHYDRO. Then folate reductase. Thank you very much, Chimamba. But you need to add R before O. Okay? Thank you. Okay, now the absorption of folic acid. The absorption of folic acid, thank you very much. That's it. Where's the Lawrence? Thank you very much. Okay? That is the enzyme. That is the enzyme that converts what? The enzyme that converts folic acid to tetrahydrofolate, which is the active form of folate. Okay. So let's quickly round up folic acid absorption. Okay. The folic acid, the folate absorption, that is the folate is the one that we get in our food. The absorption starts with the formation of monoglutamate form, because the one in our food occurs in polyglutamate form. It has to be converted to monoglutamate before it is absorbed. But I don't want to run you down. The folates are actually absorbed in the proximal small intestine. The folates are actually absorbed in the proximal part of what? Small intestine. Okay? It is absorbed in the proximal part of small intestine, and it has to be metabolized to what we call methyl tetrahydrofolate. That is, this monoglutamate, example of it is what we call methyl tetrahydrofolate. Okay? Methyl tetrahydrofolate. When it is metabolized to methyl tetrahydrofolate, it is now absorbed through the proximal small intestine. When it's absorbed through the proximal part of the small intestine, it is carried into this circulation. It is carried into the circulation, and it is stored. It is stored in the liver. If it is not utilized, it is stored in the liver, in form of polyglutamate. In form of polyglutamate, it is stored in the liver in form of polyglutamate. What are the biological functions of what are the biological functions of the folic acid? I'm trying to rush it so that we let us kind of not stay long again, because already I've noticed that some people are becoming this thing. So let me just kind of give you an overview. Okay, what are the biological functions of the folate? Number one function is that folates they act as donors and acceptors of one carbon unit in the body. They act as donors and acceptors of what? One carbon unit in the body. Okay? And this active form called tetrahydrofolate is involved in so many things. Number one is actually involved in what we call one carbon metabolism. One carbon metabolism, that is accepting one carbon atom so that different proteins and nucleic acid, even DNA, can be synthesized in the body. It is stored in the liver as polyglutamate. Okay. So what are the functions? You can see that there is a reaction, like it's also folic acid, that is folate, is involved in the conversion of homocysteine to methionine. You remember, I mentioned this when we are discussing vitamin B12. Okay? I heard polyglutamate. Where is it? That is correct. Polyglutamate. Okay? And it's stored in the liver. Okay. So it's involved in the conversion of homocysteine to methionine. And I said in this particular reaction, vitamin B12, that is the reaction that combines vitamin B12 and folate together. Vitamin B12 is utilized as methylcobalamin, while the active form of folate is produced in this particular reaction. And I said here that when there is no vitamin B12, you have accumulation of folate, what we call folate trap. You eat folate, but you won't be able to utilize it because you don't have vitamin B12 to produce the active form of what? Folate. Okay? Now, we actually describe this, in detail when we discuss vitamin B12 metabolism. Now, what are the significance of the folate? Folate is actually needed in the production of purines and pyrimidine. That is the building block of DNA. Building block of DNA. They are, like I said, okay. Neji said it is stored in the liver as what? Glutamate. I've mentioned it before. Wednesday has written it down there. Please, glutamate. Is it folate absorption or folic acid absorption? I said here that folic acid is the supplement form. The supplement form, once you take it, you swallow it, it is converted to tetrahydrofolate by an enzyme called dihydroreductase. Then the folate, the one you take in your food, is the one that occurs as a polyglutamate and must be reduced to monoglutamate before it is absorbed in the proximal part of the small intestine. And then it is converted. The active form is generated by that reaction between vitamin B12 and folic acid. That is conversion of homocysteine to methionine. In that reaction, vitamin B12 works as what? Methylcobalamin, as coenzyme, while the active form of folate, that is tetrahydrofolate, is generated. Okay? And I said functions of folic acid. I said they are involved in one carbon atom what we call one carbon metabolism. They are involved in donating and accepting one carbon atom in many metabolic processes that take place in the body. And this one carbon atom, what are they? Where are they actually utilized? They are utilized in producing DNA. That is the molecules and the purine and pyrimidine that is needed for the production of DNA and RNA. That is DNA and RNA precursors. They are needed to produce what? DNA and RNA precursors. Okay? So when you hear that folic acid is actually involved in what? Production of DNA and RNA, it's because they are involved in the production of DNA and RNA precursors. Okay? They are involved in nucleic acid metabolism. Okay, Najine, can you tell me, can you put it down where the confusion is coming from? Is it in the precious ways? I said it is absorbed in the proximal part of the intestine. When it is absorbed in the proximal part of the intestine as methylcobalamin, as a monoglutamate, okay? Monoglutamate, that is methyl tetrahydrofolate, monoglutamate. It is absorbed. Remember I said in the food, it occurs as polyglutamate, okay? So it is reduced to monoglutamate and then absorbed in the proximal part of the intestine. And it is absorbed, it enters the bloodstream and it is then stored in the liver. It is taken to cells to be utilized or stored in the liver as polyglutamate. But whenever it is going to be utilized, it needs to be utilized in its active form. And the active form is what? Tetrahydrofolate. And this tetrahydrofolate is only generated in that reaction, conversion of homocysteine to methionine, where in that reaction, vitamin B12 acts as coenzyme in form of methylcobalamin, and tetrahydrofolate is generated. And it is when it is generated that is now used in the producing of precursors of DNA. It is when this active form, tetrahydrofolate, is produced that it can now be utilized to produce what? The precursors of DNA and RNA. Okay? Neji, I don't know whether the confusion is now over or are you still confused? Are you still confused? Okay? Okay. So we said here that it's involved in what? DNA synthesis and RNA synthesis. Okay. CNS, yes, Shimamba, you are correct. DNA synthesis and RNA synthesis. Okay? The DNA synthesis and RNA synthesis can only take place when the folic acid or folate being utilized in DNA synthesis, RNA synthesis, they can only be utilized in form of its active form as what? Tetrahydrofolate. And what did they actually do? What does folic acid do in DNA synthesis? What they do is they are involved in the conversion of the oxyuridine monophosphate to the oxythymidine monophosphate. The oxyuridine monophosphate, this is just the building block of DNA. The oxyuridine monophosphate, the folic acid, that's the tetrahydrofolate, is involved in the conversion of the oxyuridine monophosphate to the oxythymidine monophosphate. Okay? Remember I said that one of the work of folic acid is that it is involved in accepting and donating one carbon atom in so many metabolic processes that take place in the body. That is, it is involved in what we call one carbon atom metabolism. One carbon atom metabolism. And one of the places where this one carbon atom metabolism it plays its role very well. Is in the what? Production of DNA and RNA. Production of DNA and RNA. And I said, what does folic acid do in the production of DNA and RNA? They help in the conversion of the oxyuridine monophosphate to thymidine monophosphate. And the form of the form of folic acid that is involved in this reaction is what? The tetrahydrofolate. That is the active form. It is involved in accepting one carbon atom. In this case, when that is done, you have what? 5,10-methylene tetrahydrofolate. But if this is complicated, just know that vitamin B, just know that folic acid or folate is involved in the formation of what? Precursors of DNA and RNA. They are involved in the formation of precursors of DNA and RNA. Okay? They are also involved in what? Amino acid metabolism. They are also involved in amino acid metabolism. So we have functions now. 1-carbon metabolism, which plays this role very well in formation of so many compounds in the body, in production of precursors of DNA and RNA, number 1. Number 2, amino acid. They are also involved in amino acid metabolism. Okay? In DNA, remember I said in DNA synthesis, okay, we normally say that folate helps in what? DNA synthesis. DNA and RNA synthesis. I said, what do they actually do? What they do is that they are involved in conversion of the oxyuridine monophosphate to the oxythymidine monophosphate. If you don't get it, leave it. Just know that folic acid is involved in the production of what? DNA and RNA precursors. DNA and RNA precursors. They are also involved in amino acid metabolism. They are also involved in amino acid metabolism. Okay. As I said earlier, what are the dietary sources of folate? We said that the food that are actually rich in folate is vegetables. You can also see them in liver, kidney, milk, and fruit, but you have them being prominently present in vegetables like spinach, green vegetables like spinach, okay, cauliflower. Cauliflower is also rich in folic acid. Vegetables like spinach, cauliflower. Yes, cauliflower is also very rich in folate. But the problem with folic acid or folate is that they are heat sensitive. So what happens is that cauliflower, okay, what happens is that when you overcook your vegetables, if you want to get value from your vegetables, then you don't overcook them. You don't overcook it. When you overcook it, what happens? You lose the folate in them. Let's look at daily requirements. The daily requirements for men needs like 100 microgram per day. 100 microgram per day. Women who are not pregnant need like 100 microgram per day, while pregnant women need like 400 microgram per day. Pregnant women need like 400 microgram per day. Okay? Dietary deficiency comes when we don't eat enough. When we don't eat enough, as I said, microgram per day, yes. Okay? Men 100 microgram, women 100 microgram, while pregnant women 400 microgram per day. Okay? The deficiency can arise when you overcook your food. you are eating a lot of vegetables, but you overcook them, okay? Or you don't eat enough. If you don't eat enough, or impaired absorption at the small intestine level, or there are some drugs. There are some drugs that interfere with absorption of folic acid. Drugs like sulfametazole interferes with absorption of folic acid, okay? And also in some disease conditions, when you have like hemolytic anemia, and or people that are undergoing dialysis, because of loss of the folic acid as a result of dialysis, they can also have loss, okay? Then increased demand in pregnancy. Those who are pregnant have increased demand, okay? That's it. Now we have clinical presentation. When there is deficiency, you have clinical presentation. There is deficiency of folate and vitamin B12 causes what we call megaloblastic anemia. Megaloblastic anemia. Megaloblastic anemia arises as a result of either deficiency of B12 or folate. We are going to look at megaloblastic anemia next time. Today, we are going to end today's lecture here. We already stayed 1 hour, 30 minutes already. So we'll end this lecture here today. I don't know whether we have any question. Somebody said drugs like, okay, sulfametazole. Sulfametazole. Sulfur, okay, metazole interferes with the absorption of folic acid, okay. Thank you very much. We are going to end the class here and now. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, the question says megaloblastic anemia is as a result of deficiency of folic acid, deficiency of folate and vitamin B12. That's what causes megaloblastic anemia. Deficiency of folate and vitamin B12 causes megaloblastic anemia. We are going to look at it next time. Thank you very much. Let's call it a day. Okay.